Time is sponsored by Volunteers of America Southeast.
And it is Faith Time, our weekly conversation on matters of faith. And joining us this morning is Pastor Sam Sinclair with Cloverleaf Baptist Church in Mobile. Thank you for joining us this morning, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we wanted to talk about a topic that you are currently preaching on. We wanted to talk about the Ten Commandments. They're both very familiar and also sometimes misunderstood. How do you feel that sometimes they can be misunderstood?
Well, I think for some people, the Ten Commandments are a little more than just an ancient law code that don't really apply too much to us today living in the year 2018. But I think for most people, the real danger is seeing the Ten Commandments as just a list of rules that we follow that make us right with God. But Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, he actually clarified what God intended all along with the Ten Commandments. And Jesus said something like this, that it's not just about the behavior, but it's also about the heart. And it's not just about avoiding negative behavior, but it actually requires that we positively obey God. So what we learn most importantly from the Ten Commandments is that it sets really an unattainably high standard for us. It's not enough to just avoid murder, but we've got to avoid the attitudes that lead to murder, like anger, bitterness, unforgiveness. And that standard leaves us in a place where we are desperate for forgiveness and really guilty before a holy God.
Of all the commandments that there are, what do you think is the commandment that is most misconstrued by modern Christians?
Well, on one level, you could say all of them, when we begin to just see it as about behavior, just about avoiding stuff. But if you're looking at a single commandment, it's probably the one actually that I'll be talking about today at 11 a.m. And that's the fourth commandment: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And so questions come up like this: what day do we follow the Sabbath? Do we, as Christians living in the New Testament era, are we required to abstain from work? Am I sinning by giving an interview here on a Sunday morning? But really what that commandment is all about is rest. And not just physical rest, but spiritual rest. And what it really calls us to is what Jesus talks about: come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. It's about stopping our self-efforts of trying to earn our way to God and instead resting in the finished work of Jesus Christ for us.
What would you say is the significance of God sort of codifying his law for his people? Well,
I don't know about you, but if I don't write something down, if it's not written down somewhere, I'm going to forget it. The story's going to change. But by writing his law for us in stone, God is showing to us the permanence, the eternality of his moral law code. It doesn't change. And more than that, it reminds us that God is not silent, but he is speaking. He's actively reaching out to a broken world and inviting us to know him and to worship him.
How do you think these simple rules that were crafted thousands of years ago are still applicable today?
Well, if they're God's eternal law code for us, they really show us how to flourish in his world. After all, God's the one who made us, and so he's sort of giving us, here's the manual, here's how to flourish. And they show us, love God, love your neighbor. And the reality is that we cannot fulfill the Ten Commandments unless we have a heart change. And we get that heart change through the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Really quick, what commandment do you feel should be valued above others?
Jesus was one time asked by a legal expert in the Old Testament law, what is the greatest commandment? And he responded by saying, love God with all of your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's really what lies behind the Ten Commandments. The first four of the Ten Commandments talk about our relationship with God and how we love him. And then the last six talk about how we love our neighbor. So for example, I can't really be loving my neighbor while I'm stealing from him, while I'm slandering him. And so what the Ten Commandments do is they invite us into a love relationship with our Creator. And then from the overflow of that relationship, we are then enabled to love our neighbors as ourselves.
Excellent challenges, excellent questions coming from the Ten Commandments. Sam Sinclair with Cloverleaf Baptist Church in Mobile. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Faith Time. And News 5 this morning will continue after the break.